All right, so today's topic is ambition. Is it a dirty word?
Is ambition a dirty word? That is an excellent question. I think depending on who you're talking about, if it's a male or a female, it can be a dirty word.
I hadn't thought about it in terms of gender, but you're absolutely right. Because I was on Instagram the other day, shocker, I know. But there was something about a post about hustling and, grinding and making it work. But is that the lifestyle or that you want to live in order to achieve what it is that you want?
Well, when I was thinking about it, the hustle aspect of it is that sometimes, and I keep hearing this in some of the clubhouse rooms that I'm in, that hustle mentality, that is somehow wrong, or that it's too much, and that it's, the word toxic gets thrown around a lot, and I've been hearing it a lot, right? And we have an episode on toxic masculinity that's coming up. We've got toxic positivity.
Even the person that we're talking to later, she is, toxic, or will be talking about relationships and family relationships and how they can be toxic.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of that. And so I'm wondering if the word ambition is being thrown into that same arena of just saying, hey, this is a negative thing. Because like you want people to be ambitious. You want them to shoot for the stars, but don't shoot too far, because if you're shooting too far, you're going to make the rest of us uncomfortable.
Well, when you talk about hustling and grinding, I mean, there is a negative connotation that can be associated with that. Like, are you operating outside of this ideal work-life balance? Are you grinding too hard that your other relationships or your mental health or your mental well-being is at stake? So I can understand it being negative in that way. But I also think, though, that some of the greatest achievements or goals that we want out of life are going to take hard work, dedication, perseverance, and that might require hustling or grinding from time to time. And look at what the podcast, when we launched that, you and I are both working full-time jobs, and we were putting in hours to promote the podcast, edit the videos, all that, develop the content. That took time, and it's growing. But I think that it also takes a while for you, anytime you take on a new project, to find that happy place where you can grind, but you can also live.
Agreed. There is that happy medium, right? Like, so you talked about the ideal work-life balance. I don't know what that is.
I think that it's different for every person.
Right, exactly. But there is something that society has said is, no, this is ideal. And if you're going too far, that's a bad thing. But then it becomes like a cultural thing, because in other cultures, they don't work the hours we work, right? They don't do the same things that Americans do. And so I'm wondering if ambition would be the same thing, where it's different in every single place, where, yeah, have ambition, but maybe not that kind of American ambition, because that American ambition is, dare I say, toxic.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I do work with a lot of international clients, and they talk about going on holiday. What a concept that is to me, because I'm thinking, well, if I take a holiday, I think we've mentioned this in previous episodes, my company is going to implode on itself. Is it really? No, but that is what the belief that I tell myself. So I think that especially in, Western cultures, this desire, this ambition to succeed, to be the top of your game is above all else, like the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's an ugly way to look at it.
I agree. I think that's, again, though, I go back to, is it a gender issue? Because I don't think I've ever heard, oh, that guy, he's way too ambitious and he needs to be knocked down a couple pegs. Like, I hear that about women.
Well, I think as you're talking, I'm reminded of our conversation with Dr. LaForge in the Imposter Syndrome, where she talked about that women had to work harder to, quote unquote, prove themselves in whatever field it was that they were, had a profession in. And so I think that, as young kids, we see our parents, our mothers working hard. That's not to say that men like you can't also be ambitious or see that work ethic from their mother. But I think as women, I still feel that that's embedded into us. As women, we have to be able to balance family, work, ourselves. If you have children, you have to balance the children. I think that we take on a lot more And I think that that's why, there's still that stigma that, if I have kids, I have to give up my career. Well, why is that? Why can't you have both? So I think you're right. I think it absolutely has to do with gender.
I think so, but even with giving up both, I mean, it goes back to just that feminism, right? Well, are you giving up things? Do you have to give up things? Can you have it all? Can you not have it all at the same time? I mean, like, that's just, there's so many things there to unpack that would be its own episode. But I'm just going back to ambition. Like, ambitious women,
they get a negative rap.
Yeah, we love them, and yet we're like, ooh, you're getting too big for your britches.
As you're talking, I feel that women are slowly becoming, CEOs of major corporations, but I also feel that they're also under a microscope, probably more so than their male counterparts.
100%. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is something not just when you're a woman, but when you're a woman and when you're a person of color. If you're the only person at the table, are you really under that microscope, or do you just feel like you are? Because not only is this your opportunity, but if you screw it up, what's going to happen to the next person? So, like, I remember when I was a law clerk for the judge I worked at, I was her first law clerk to sit for a second bar. Now, I was sitting for a California bar, and I had to take off time to do that, which inconvenienced her, which she was not exactly very happy about. And I just remember thinking to myself, if I screw this up, I'm going to screw it up for the rest of her law clerks. If I made it a difficult process for her, my employer, she was not going to allow other people that same opportunity to take the bar a second time. And so I felt that pressure and was like, okay, well, she didn't say anything, but I just knew going first somehow meant that I needed to make it that much easier. So that way, when the next person came around, it's like, oh yeah, I also want to take another bar since, I'm still fresh from law school and I want to make sure that I've got this opportunity, that it wouldn't be, oh no, I've done that before and I can't allow that to happen, because if that negative experience were to happen, I just could see the ripple effects down the road. And maybe that was just me being too much of a warrior. I don't know.
It's that people pleaser in you.
Maybe, but I definitely felt that pressure. And so I feel like even if you are that ambitious person and you are that first one up, you want to make sure that you're not the last one.
No, that makes sense, because you are clearing the way for others that might be following behind you. And that's definitely added pressure.
It adds a ton of pressure. And so if you're that first person, yeah, you are under a microscope, and whether or not that's imposed by the organization or by yourself, I'm not really sure. I think it might be a both and situation, because you also want to make sure, hey, I'm not screwing this up for the next person who wants to go off and do pro bono work for 2 months.
Speaking of ambition, do you ever feel, and it could be part of this imposter syndrome, like that you're not meant to be here, or do you ever feel guilty from the success that you've gained in your career?
I would say there are moments where I've definitely felt guilt, especially when I look at the very different lifestyle that I have versus my family in Central America. It is very different. I distinctly remember going to the ATM the last time I was in Guatemala and going to withdraw something, and like my one paycheck was basically what my brother makes for the entire year. And that's not a whole lot down there, right? But the money's different and it converts differently. And so you've got all those things. And so there was a certain level of guilt there. And so I'm probably more generous than I need to be in those instances. But, at the same time, out of sight, out of mind, I'm not constantly sending money back to Central America, because I grew up here. And so I know, even though my parents send money back, I'm not one of those immigrants who's here and their sole purpose is to send money back to their home countries. Because when you look at it, I can't remember the exact statistic, but like Mexico and Central America, a good part of their GDP is foreign money. And so they have somebody in the US who is supporting them over there. I don't have that responsibility. And I'm sure I'm sure if anybody wanted me to, like,
They wouldn't be opposed.
they wouldn't be opposed to me doing that stuff. And so, in fact, when I came back from that trip, I'd thought about paying for English classes for my nieces. And I had to really unpack it with Matt and my therapist, because like, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this? And what it really came down to was, it was like this guilt that I carry of just being where I'm at. And, maybe I could pay it off. And actually that comes to like a bigger issue with just like the debt that I feel in my family that I owe my parents, specifically my parents. I feel like I owe my brothers a little bit, but not in the same way, but like just this debt for basically being alive.
Well, and you and I have talked about that before, and it's not hard to create a child, and to get to where you are was blood, sweat, and tears of your own, no one else's. And so the success that you have and the new journey or path that you've kind of forged with yourself, especially like going into coaching and stuff like that, that's all you. That has not been a result of any help emotionally, financially, spiritually from either side of your family. So I can understand the guilt. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's also cultural?
I don't know that it's so much cultural. I think it is more of just this situation that I'm in, and unpacking the things that I'm trying to unpack with them. What about you? Do you feel any kind of guilt for your success?
I do. Especially when I go home back to my small town of Visalia, California. I don't know what it is. Maybe because it's a small town, I'll go out and I'll see all the people. Of course, I'll look like garbage, right? But in talking with them, they're still doing the same profession that they were doing back when we were in high school, or maybe they're now the manager or whatever it was. And so to talk to them and to share with them, the different clients I've worked with, how I've traveled different parts of the world, I feel bad. So I actually downplay all that I've accomplished because I feel bad. And it's not like I owe this individual or individuals anything, but I just feel bad. And I don't know why that is, because, my childhood wasn't the best, and we all grew up in the same town and had the same opportunities. Well, maybe not the same opportunities, but, in terms of like going to school and stuff like that. But it was definitely because of ambition that I got out of there, because I knew that if I didn't leave, I'd be stuck there. And that's not to say being stuck there is wrong. There's, plenty of family and friends that have beautiful homes, made beautiful lives out there, but I just knew that it wasn't for me. Yet knowing that it wasn't for me and doing all that I needed to do to get out, I still feel bad when I return to just share. I mean, you would think that a true friend, right? They're going to be excited. Wow, tell me more about these travels. But I couldn't even get myself to that point. I couldn't share or celebrate, wow, look how far I've come in my career. Like, that is something to celebrate, but I feel like I can't.
And that makes a lot of sense, because a part of that is they can see it too. You're not the same person, right? I'm not the same person when I go to Central America. And each time you go back, you are changed and evolving and growing. You're doing all this growth, and maybe they're not. But again, that goes back to choices, right? You made decisions for yourself to get you to this point, and they've made other decisions that led them on their path, whatever that is. And so I don't know that ambition is necessarily a bad thing for us if it's helped us achieve certain things that we wanted to achieve and live a lifestyle that we want to live. But I do understand that sense of guilt of going back and not being able to really express yourself. And one of the things that you were talking about kind of brought it up to, if you were kicked out of the tribe or the colony or whatever when you were young, you would not survive, right? Like, okay, you're getting ostracized. Like, that's it. You're no longer part of this community. And so as you return back to these communities and you return with your successes, I could see where that would make it difficult, because you're not necessarily going back into that community. You're still an outsider.
Well, and also too, especially with therapy, I've learned that certain triggers will take me back to a younger version of Melissa that maybe had trauma or pain that I haven't worked through. So sometimes even going back to my hometown, I revert back to that old Melissa. And that old Melissa was very much a people pleaser. I was very quiet, which I'm sure you're probably like, oh, can you go back to that? But
just sometimes.
But I mean, so I think, as we're talking, and this is kind of unfolding for me, that maybe when I'm going back and I'm feeling this uncomfortableness about like sharing my life and the accomplishments, it's because I'm going back to that 12-year-old Melissa that didn't want any attention on herself because, it was such a chaotic, turbulent household that, being not seen was probably what saved me.
And
this is an epiphany moment here on Pivotal Moments.
There you go. No, I could see that. But part of what was bubbling up for me when you were talking about that was maybe it's that story you're telling yourself of, oh, what is that story, that inner dialogue? What's going on when you go back home? What's going on in my head every single time I go back to Central America? It's like, what are those narratives we're telling ourselves? And even though some of those things might be true, like I'm the American, that is very true when I go back to Central America, maybe that's not really everything that they're thinking. And we're just making up these stories. And so then we freeze and don't necessarily want to share. And with us not sharing, we're eliminating that possibility of some actual genuine connection.
No, that makes a lot of sense. As you're talking about the narratives that we're telling ourselves, what's coming up for me is, is ambition self-serving? Are we using it as a vehicle to get out of that small town, to distance ourselves from our families? Is it self-serving? Is it a selfish thing to have ambition?
I feel like ambition is just another word for hope.
Ooh.
It's just another way of saying I'm hopeful and I have the belief in myself to be able to go and achieve something, whatever that achievement is. And so if you have that ambition, really what you're saying is that I have the wherewithal and the hope that I can go after this, and then you do.
I could see how it ties into self-worth. I believe I can, so I will.
Right. Because if you can't see yourself doing it, well, then you can't. It's very simple. You can't do it. It doesn't work if you don't believe it. And so if you have that belief along with the action, and then you go for it, like that's where I think ambition comes in. It's having that hope and belief in yourself of being able to go and do the thing. I don't know what the thing is. Everybody's got a different thing that they want to do. But if you have that, then I don't see how it could be a negative. I see how we treat it as a negative sometimes. But if we're talking about this inner belief and we're talking about you being able to set those goals and go after it yourself, that all just sounds positive to me.
Now, I guess maybe the reason why I've always kind of not had a negative connotation with ambition, because I do think it's a good thing. But when I'm thinking of, you'd mentioned earlier, oh, he's an ambitious man. There's also a sense of not like cockiness, but like there's an arrogance typically, or maybe I'm just imposing this out there, but about them. And that's why you're like, oh, well, I don't really necessarily want to do business with him, or I don't really want him to be my colleague. So I think that's for me why I had a negative connotation with ambition. Do you think that a person can have too much ambition?
I don't know if a person can have too much ambition. I mean, if you don't do anything with it, then it's a pipe dream kind of a thing. But really what I'm thinking more of is with men, you want an ambitious man. That's what society tells us, right? You want a man who's like going somewhere and like you want to be that person that's going with them, right? But with women, you don't get that same message. With women, it's, oh, she's ambitious. And it's just even the way they say it, it's like, well, what's wrong with that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't see anything wrong with it. But I just feel like the messaging is a little bit different between men and women.
No, it is, because as you're talking, behind every strong man is a strong woman. Mm-hmm. But you never hear behind every strong woman is a strong man.
No, you don't hear that. But even then, just if a guy, back when you were single, if a guy wasn't ambitious, that was a turnoff. That was a negative. Oh no, yeah,
That still is. That still is.
Well, and why is it though? With like, why is that something or a quality that we would want to see in a man? But with women, we're maybe, I think from our conversation right now, maybe we're neutral.
I could see that. Coming back to answer your question, though, as to why I personally would want an ambitious man is because I, too, am ambitious. And I would want someone to be able to see my strengths and help me propel and stretch myself beyond what I think I'm capable of. Mm-hmm. And I think ambitious people see that in one another. You know, we see each other's strengths and how can we all elevate to the top together, rather than, you know, having someone that's maybe complacent that it just stands on the sidelines while you work.
Mm-hmm. But I also feel like if you're looking at it as somebody who's standing on the sidelines and everybody else is working towards something, what if they're not necessarily standing on the sidelines, but they're just being present? Because I can tell you, Matt's not necessarily an ambitious person. I would never describe him as ambitious. And I would, early on, I'd ask him like, what are your goals? Like all of the stuff that I wanted to know. And his goals are, you know, simple. He wants to be able to retire. He wants to have a good retirement. And it's not, you know, I want to have a retirement in this opulent house and I want to have all of these things. I want to be able to turn on the air conditioning. Like, it's none of that stuff. It is all very contained and reasonable, but that doesn't make me think that it's bad that he doesn't have it. Like, I feel like I got plenty of ambition for the two of us.
Well, that's actually something that I've been working with my therapist about in terms of just not complacency, because I do have like this definitely have a negative connotation with complacency. But what I most appreciate about Vince is the fact that he is my biggest cheerleader, because I think even though society has always told us that we want an ambitious partner, I don't know how, I mean, you do have power couples out there, but I don't know if two ambitious people, depending, I guess, on the path that they're on, can really support each other because their ambition is driving their own propulsion. Does that make sense? So I think that it's been nice having a partner that has supported, encouraged, and been like my cheerleader through not only my career, but here with the podcast and a few other ventures that I'm working on. So I think for every ambitious person, it's nice to have a partner or a support system that can sit there and rally behind you as you continue to move ahead in life.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be the nice balance. Mm-hmm. Within it, right? Because maybe his ambition is different and isn't as outward as it is with us, right? Like we set a goal, we go after it, and we achieve it. Maybe they're not necessarily as direct with it, and they've got their own things going on. But I mean, I just don't know. There's a lot of interesting things going on, especially when you're looking at the power dynamics of couples and seeing what's going to happen, because I see it in Hollywood couples, right, where one celebrity or actor ends up getting more roles and then they break up because it's like, okay, well, I've spent too much time supporting your rise and now my career's falling, or it's not keeping pace with yours, and maybe the relationship started with one of them as the bigger star and then it reverses. So like Jessica Simpson talks about that in her book with Nick Lachey and with her marriage. He was more famous when they got married and when they started dating, but then she became bigger and he couldn't handle that anymore. Both ambitious people, both on similar trajectories, but then when things got shifted, it no longer worked. And there was a whole lot more that was in there, but definitely that feeling of, okay, what about me? What about me? Like, that's basically what she implies that he had it in the book. And you know, I like not necessarily having that. Matt's not like, hey, what about me? Like, you know, he's content with what he's doing. And I don't think content is a bad word.
Why did you feel that ambition was a topic that we should bring onto the show?
It's something that I remember hearing people talking about ambition and hustle mentality as negative things. I'm like, well, are they? I don't know. And just knowing that there are conversations happening out there where they think that ambition is promoting a negative lifestyle, ambition, and the hustle mentality that you always have to be going. And I agree to a certain extent, right? Not everything has to be go, go, go. It's like, okay, well, when are you going to be if all you're doing is going? You have to be able to sit there and just be. But I just wanted to explore that idea to see what would come out of it. And I still don't necessarily think that ambition is a negative thing, but like anything in excess is going to be bad for you.
I was just about to say that everything in excess could be bad for you. Exercise, clean eating, all that stuff. And just in life, there's a duality to it. Black and white, good versus evil, ambition versus being present or being, as you said, everything with practice or everything with balance.
We want to hear from you. How would you define ambition? Let us know on Instagram or on our private Facebook group, Pivotal Moments HQ. We want to thank our producer and music director, Ron Johnson. This has been an Astronomicus DMR production. Thank you for listening. Remember, it's never too late and you're right on time.